The premise for Forever Night, actually, it didn't come from me. I guess maybe the redemption part came from me. But there was a script that Barney Cohen wrote, and that's why you see his name as the co-creator on the series.
Never met him.
There was a vampire cop in New York. It didn't bear a whole heck of a lot of resemblance to what the show actually became. And the huge difference between my script and Barney's original script was that I don't believe that Barney had read Anne Rice prior to it. And in reading Interview with a Vampire, which I think at that time was the only one of her books that was out at that time, but in reading Interview, her cosmos, the cosmology of her world of vampires was very appealing to me, and very much about the issues that I wanted to put into Forever Night, into Nick Knight. And it made a whole lot of sense. In fact, I don't think I accepted rewriting the script until I wanted to read her book first and see what that take was, and see if I was really interested in doing it. So I credit Anne Rice, who I've subsequently been fortunate enough to work with, and her view of who vampires are and what kind of subjects you can cover with vampirism and the afterlife, with certainly influencing me heavily in this show.
And Jim, did Anne ever see anything of the show by the time you worked with her on the show that you worked with her?
Did I ever what?
Did she ever see any of?
She did.
Okay.
She saw it and liked it.
Jeanette.
You felt me.
Yes.
That's very good, Nicolas.
There was an original. Would you call it a pilot? The one you did with?
Yeah, we made the original pilot was for a primetime pilot for CBS.
And it was with Rick Springfield.
Yeah.
And that was the one that you and Barney had basically came from Barney's idea, and then you'd rewritten it, yeah?
Yep. And then when Geraint became involved, it did not make the schedule. And a couple years later, they approached me to do it as a late night CBS show. And so we reinvented it.
Oddly enough, was the best thing that happened for it.
Oh, yeah.
Because had it, I think, maintained its primetime placement, it wouldn't have been nearly as, well, not as much fun for us to do anyway.
Well,
and first of all, I wouldn't be in it. Would it be like, oh,
no, you wouldn't be in it. But,
you
know, the flashbacks didn't exist in the original 2-hour pilot.
And that's part of the fun. In each story, in each episode, it would take you back to a period in the 800 years that he has been living, or what are you?
Undead.
Undeadling, and it would take you back to a period. And so
we get to the source of his angst and how it butt up against whatever case he was working on in the present.
And that was a lot of the fun of doing the show, was being able to put on different wigs, do silly walks. And,
interestingly, the reason why we did that, had these flashbacks, is the Canadian delivery time was very different from the U.S. delivery time. The U.S. delivery time was 42 minutes, and the Canadian delivery time was 48 minutes. And we said, how do we do shows that aren't just going to fall apart when you cut that much time out of them, or pad them in the other direction? And so that I came up with this idea of doing these flashbacks that we would just lift out of the American version. And of course, we all fell in love with the flashbacks and liked them.
Cut everything else
they worked well. We cut everything else out. That was the problem.
I desire the money. Mark my words, Nicholas. You will learn this lesson well. Material wealth is a burden.
Flashbacks really became the heart and soul of the show, I think. They gave it a depth that it wouldn't have had if we just done the vampire cop thing.
It was great to see the echo from a different point of view.
Yeah.
It was, you say, this is the problem, and then you get to see it from, well, with different parameters. You get to see it from what was going on in Nazi Germany. You get to see the same problem as someone maybe being persecuted, or whatever. However, it's actually a lot of it was about persecution.
Or belief in God, belief in an afterlife, dealing with Joan of Arc. And when your character, when Nick confronts, we flash back to Joan of Arc and
tries to have it all on tape. Have it all on Joan.
But and the belief, because there's something about in vampires in everlasting life and becoming a vampire that sort of says you deny the fact that there's anything after. so that you want to stay here. And so when you're confronted with someone who so believes that there is something after, how do you face that?
You really think it's possible, don't you, to start over?
Yes.
I hope you're right,
You do?
if that's what you want. I would have killed to set her free, and I would do no less for you.
You must never do that.
Nicolas, you've been so weakened by this human concept of justice. Its lack of simplicity.
Celeste is going to jail for what she did. What could be simpler?
She's going from one prison to another. Her death would have been simpler.
Forever Night began as this 2-hour pilot for CBS, and then I think it was 2 or 3 years later, they came back and said, would you do it as a late night? And what they wanted to do, what they were setting up at that time was co-productions in Canada with Canadian producers, which this became. And the show was to shoot in Toronto, and we were to find a Canadian star and Canadian actors to do it. Matter of fact, I think I was the only American, pretty much. We had a couple of writers, but that was it.
It was very much.
It was pretty much it.
Very much a
and it was really was a Canadian production, and so I went up to Toronto. We auditioned a whole mess of actors, and this is the guy I
got the
wanted.
messiest
We
one
got
of them
it.
all.
Yeah.
What was actually quite wonderful about Forever Night as well it was one of the first shows produced for an American network that used Toronto as Toronto, because in Canada we use Toronto as Boston and Chicago and everywhere else and everything else. So I don't know how that decision was made, but it was, including the CN Tower was a big deal. But having said that as well, we had the opportunity to include a lot of the talent, the acting talent that was working in the country at the time. So people had an opportunity that they would not normally have had. And I was very lucky, because I've been working with them for so long, to be able to introduce some of them to the gang and have them on the show. One of them involves a young lady named Carrie-Anne Moss, who subsequently has gone on to do the Matrix films and Chocolat and a bunch of other wonderful pieces of work. And Carrie-Anne was on an episode, I believe it was number 17 or 18, I'm going to say that, directed by Richard Lewis, and it involved, I'm going to get this right, it was about the 12-step program.
Right.
And she gets Nick involved in the 12-step program, and it's a very dark episode.
That was a dark episode.
And it also ran something, it was 62 minutes long or something, and you had to cut the living daylights out of it. It was just long.
62 would be very
long. I think it was a two-parter by the time we got done with it.
We must leave this region now.
But what about Nicolas' business?
Whatever business it is, we can be certain that it is pure folly. And that will only bring us trouble.
I think we'll be safe here till the King's Guards pass.
Who's that?
Allies, show them the prize.
Look. A king's ransom.
One of my favorite days on the set of Forever Night was episode, it was called Blood Money. It was episode 26 in the second here. It was a story about money lost. Actually, two of my best friends were in that, Andrew Gillis and Colin Fiore. And Colin came on to play a very evil man. And the backstory, which was the best part of it, was a fencing duel that Colin and I had, and we'd been playing at Stratford, the Shakespeare Festival in Canada for many years, and so Jim allowed this fencing thing to occur, and so we had one of the best fight directors on the continent, had a beautiful period set, a la Three Musketeers-ish kind of period, and Colin and I donned our wigs and pulled out our foils. We'd actually done the Three Musketeers together, Colin and myself, and I was D'Artagnan, he was Athos, older. And Col was so sporty, and I also directed it, and it was one of those days where you're on a set, and you're surrounded by friends, you're doing something you really enjoy doing, which was a little fencing, a little, role playing, little kid stuff, and you're just looking around thinking, does it get any better? That was the
last episode of this season.
Of that season. Well, you were there. You remember?
I was there.
Yeah.
I was going to say I was there.
Yeah.
I remember
and it was just fabulous, and the spirits. Everyone was such good spirits.
really liked the Joan of Arc story. I liked that. I just felt that in that episode we really set up, and it was very early on. I think it was our third.
3.
Yeah, we really set up what I wanted to deal with in the series, which is the whole idea of redemption, life after life, and core belief.
And also I like the one where Natalie's brother is brought across, because that also dealt with the idea of someone who you're so strong with. What will you sacrifice? And indeed that he turned out to be a bad vampire. I like the stories which had the camaraderie of Jeanette and
So did I. I like those backstory ones.
Where you go to a story where
Yeah.
you know the three caballeros are sort of bouncing around some countryside or something.
Those were always a lot of fun. I'll tell you, the pilot for me too was special in that the original Nick Knight 2-hour movie for CBS, I wrote that, but I didn't produce it, and so it was really good to take the same basic script, to be able to put the flashbacks in, and to really make it to something that I wanted to see, and this guy's a large part of it.
And you know, it was interesting because I enjoyed seeing the version that Rick Springfield was in, and John Kaplis was in that one, which is always fun. But
he's the only person who came.
It was fabulous. Yeah. But it was slightly hipper. You know, there was something hipper about it in L.A., but there was something more had an integrity and an honesty in Toronto.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting. So maybe one lost a little bit of that hip. We didn't have the rock music. We went for gothic music that you and Fred came up with, as opposed to that kind of rocky score. And I think so. It's interesting to find the new elements that Jim tossed into it that I thought.
You drive. I'll ride. In the trunk.
In the trunk? Come on, Nick. You're not that allergic to sunshine. A tan will do you good. What's a little sunburn?
Listen, I don't tan. I don't burn. I implode.
My initial reaction to Forever Night, particularly what we always get when we're going into a series originally, is the first. Well, this was a two-part beginning of the show because Jim had already written it. It was great. I loved that and subsequently enjoyed it a lot more. But it was because of the theatricality. I'd literally just come back from playing Hamlet for 5 months in England, and I was looking for something else to do. And I didn't think it would be a vampire show. To be quite honest, part of me thought it was cool, and part of me just thought, why am I sticking teeth in my face? So part of me thought it was a bit goofy as well. And I think, to be quite honest, we remained with that kind of. It was a lot of fun. So the first 2 scripts were a lot of fun. Again, even the name just made me laugh. I just thought, Nick Knight, what is that? But yeah, and honestly, the spirit with which we approached the whole thing was so positive. It maintained itself throughout the time that we were working on the show, and that's what I think I got from the first reaction to it.
But he's in trouble, which concerns me, because he worked with his father and has access to a lot of capital.
Trouble and money. It's a very dangerous combination. Cover your assets, mon amour.
Those alternate worlds, the idea of an alternate world attracts, can really suck you in the way a typical law show can't, and gets people's imaginations working in ways that they normally don't. I also think that people who respond to that type of material respond passionately to it.
Also, I think because it had its late night niche and stuff like that, it's just slightly funkier. And I think because there are not millions and millions of you watching, there's more of a club feeling to it.
Yeah, it becomes sort of a little inner circle kind of thing.
So there's that. It's more. It's ours. We can protect it kind of thing. And I think that if someone does a letter writing campaign, and if they phone, and if they go to NAPTI and things like that, there is oddly enough a sense of ownership of a show that might not happen if it's a big corporate venture. And I must say that there was, because Jim, myself, John, Kathy, Deborah, Nige, everybody, Natsuko, Gary, everyone was fairly accessible, so that it also, in an odd way, invited people in.
He asked me if I believed in vampires.
He actually said that.
What's going on? Does O'Neill know about you?
Not sure. But I have the definite impression he knows it's a vampire behind these murders.
So it's true. Well, do you know who it is?
Yes. And you're not going to believe it.
The thing with Forever Night, it started off at CBS in their late night, crime time after prime time, is that what they
Right.
call it? And then it took a little breather, whilst it was rejigged and went into first.
What happened
run
is Letterman came along.
That's right, a guy named David Letterman.
David Letterman came along and took that slot away, and when he
Exactly, just single-handedly.
so all those shows that were on the prime time, the late night thing, were canceled, and
But the man who ran it was a gentleman named Rod Perth, who ran the late night CBS. And Rod was instrumental in bringing David Letterman in. And then Rod went off to run USA Network. But that was the third.
that was
year.
actually the last
Oh, God.
season.
So we went into syndication.
The middle season was the syndication season.
So then, so we bounced all over. And it took a lot of, I think, just the interest that people showed in the show. I mean, it's a real fanatic little, they're really resilient and have a whole lot of oomph.
Yeah, there was a letter writing campaign to save the show, and there were so many letters they were just inundating the place that it was actually making.
Oh, it was taking them off.
It was the network angry.
Yeah,
It was having the reverse effect. Right. They were swamped with letters, and they were furious because they were getting all this mail. And John Feldheimer came to me and he said, "Will you please go on the internet and tell them to stop writing because it's not helping. They're not helping their cause right now."
So now you have your burden back. To your burden, then. And to what I might do to ease it for you.
It's odd, I think sometimes, fortunately, and I mean this in the nicest way, when you have other things that you're still continuing, that you're doing, it's a nice memory and it's a nice experience to remember, but I don't live there myself. I don't think you live there either.
Yeah, I don't live there, but I still have a couple of pen pals who are who I email who are from Forever Night. One just wrote one of the novels that came out.
Oh, cool, yeah. What was odd about Forever Night, of course, is because particularly the first season, we shot completely between basically 4 in the afternoon and 6 in the morning.
They were all night
So
schedule.
it was pretty brutal.
And I think we were on a 6-day schedule too.
No.
Did we move to 7?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
it was maybe like 8 of them or 6 of them.
Yeah,
but it was really tough, and we were long hours and everything else. But it seemed to be, now whether it's just my revisionist thing, but people seem to speak as if it was one of their favorite experiences. There's something about being out there in the middle of the night when everybody else is sleeping or clubbing, I don't know, that makes you actually a very tight-knit group. So the crew and us, the
crew was very close.
We're still actually
very, very tight.
Yeah, it's if you go on a set which someone was from Forever Night on, there will be instant dropping of everything and many, many hugs and no air kisses. Actual flesh on flesh, no stuff. So it was good that way.
Who is trying to set you up? Another cop?
Another vampire. For days, I felt someone watching me. Waiting for something. That's the only way the watch could have been stolen from my place.
Yeah, but why would another vampire want to...
I don't know. Maybe lifestyle prejudice.